leave. Obeying state law meant they had to pay state taxes and serve in the state militia, even fighting other Indians if called upon. If the tribes believed they could stay on their land because of prior treaties, they were wrong.
If you look at their treaties, every treaty is signed by these agents and somebody that was an interpreter. And then, of course, if the United States didn't like the treaty, they disregarded it.
Faced with overwhelming force if they resisted, the tribes slowly began to move west. First to leave were Choctaws from Mississippi, forced along by Army soldiers. During a bitter cold winter of 1831, the great-great-great-grandmother of University of Nebraska professor Donna Akers walked 500 miles with her 4 small children. 3 died when a tree struck by lightning fell on them while they slept at night.
The next morning, the soldiers came back and said that all the people had to start on down the trail. The women were, of course, still hysterical. They were mourning the death of these 3 little girls, and the men were very upset because they had not been able to do anything to help. And the troops told them that they had to move on anyway. So instead of being able to decently perform the rituals of the dead, they had to bury their bodies in shallow graves along the trail and go on.
By the end of the decade, 80,000 Indians would move, and 10,000 would die in what collectively became known as the Trail of Tears.
Many of them died actually before they even got started on the Trail of Tears because they were in these concentration camps exposed to the weather and crowded together in extremely unsanitary conditions with very little food.
Last to leave by force were the Cherokees. Many were held in prison camps before being made to walk the journey in shackles.
Let's go.
I think some of them still thought they had a deal. I think some of them still thought he's going to honor what he told me. Now, when they felt bad, I'm assuming that was when the bayonet was at their back and they were being marched to that concentration camp prior to being sent out to Oklahoma. And that's what happened to them. Double-crossed. Double-crossed. Promised one thing and another thing happened. Time and time again.
Andrew Jackson, to most Native people, is equivalent to Hitler. He's known among the Choctaw people as the Great Devil, or Blackheart.
Jackson's policy, the policy that culminated in the Trail of Tears, one of the great humanitarian tragedies in American history, was a policy that was of a piece with the policy of administrations before Jackson and after Jackson. It's easy to pin the label on Jackson because he took a more visible position. But Jackson probably would have said, this wasn't merely my policy, this was the policy of the United States government, for better or worse.
The Trail of Tears and everything really about the Indian removal is such a horror. When I went to school, a long time ago in grade school and high school, and we studied American history, there was hardly any notice of Indians. Only they were brought in occasionally as a backdrop for what the white man was doing. But now, today, with a renewed interest in all of the people who make up this country, we have found that we have done some terrible things to them. And removal is one of the worst.
It's easy for us to attack Jackson for his lack of humanity, for his lack of consideration of the Indians. He should have known better, but it's too easy for us to do that because we don't live in their world. And their world, Jackson's world, was a very brutal world.
Jackson provoked extreme feelings of hate and adoration. There was no middle ground. It is remarkable that he survived so many attacks, both physical and political, by so many foes.
When many of Jackson's opponents spoke of him as a military dictator, as a despot who's going to destroy democracy and take over the country, some people apparently took this very seriously. And one fellow decided that he was going to save democracy by assassinating Andrew Jackson.
On January 30th, 1835, Jackson was visiting the Capitol building when he was approached by a deranged, unemployed house painter named Richard Lawrence. Lawrence raised a pistol and took dead aim at the president. The gun misfired. Lawrence immediately pulled out a second pistol and shot again at near point-blank range. Again, the gun misfired. Enraged, Jackson went after Lawrence with his cane and had to be restrained by his aides. At the age of 67, Andrew Jackson had cheated death again.
A year ago, we introduced Hyundai Assurance to show